Good evening, everyone. I am Michelle Steinhues, and I am the Starfest director. We're very excited to have everyone here tonight for Starfest Presents Joshua Whitehead. We're so privileged to share all of our amazing authors and stories from the St. Albert Public Library, which sits on Treaty 6 territory, traditional lands of the First Nations and Métis people. And also privileged to host Joshua, who's joining us from Treaty 7, and Emily, who is here with us in Treaty 6. This is a virtual event, but we do want it to be an interactive event. So please put comments and questions in the chat throughout the program. We'll collect them for Emily and Joshua throughout the evening. If you haven't had a chance to purchase Johnny Appleseed, we'll provide links to Audrey's books and Glass Bookshop in the comments. And of course, we have the books at the library. So now I would like to introduce Joshua and Emily. Hello. Let me bring up my, I'm going to do a quick introduction and then I'm going to scoop because people are not here to see me. So first we'll start with Joshua. Joshua is a Two-Spirit Ojiniheo member of the Peguis First Nation, Treaty 1. He's currently a oh gosh, I have to have my coffee, a PhD candidate, lecturer, Killam scholar at the University of Calgary, where he studies Indigenous literatures and cultures with a focus on gender and sexuality. He is the author of Full Metal Indigiqueer, which was shortlisted for the inaugural Indigenous Voices Award and the Stephen G. Stephenson Award for Poetry. He is, of course, the author of Johnny Appleseed, which was long-listed for the Giller Prize, shortlisted for, among others, I had to trim this description down, otherwise we'd be here all night, shortlisted for the Indigenous Voices Award and the Governor General's Literary Award. Johnny Appleseed won the Lambda Literary Award for Gay Fiction and the Georges Bougenet Award for Fiction, as well as 2021 CBC Canada Reads. It also won the St. Albert Canada Reads that we did in March. Joshua will be in very good hands this evening. Emily Riddle is Nehio and a member of the Alexander First Nation in Treaty 6. Emily was shortlisted for the 2020 CBC Poetry Prize and selected for the 2021 Writers' Trust of Canada Mentorship Program. Her work has been published in the Globe and Mail, Teen Vogue, Canadian Art, the Malahat Review, and others. She's currently the Senior Advisor, Indigenous Relations for the Edmonton Public Library. We like library people. So I'm going to hand things over to Josh and Emily. I'm going to have a sip of coffee so I learn how to talk by the end of this session. Please, I remind you again, put your comments and questions anytime in the chat and enjoy your evening.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us in this Zoom room this evening to discuss Joshua Whitehead's novel, Johnny Appleseed. We're going to start with a reading from Josh, which we're very blessed to hear.
I'm excited. Hi, everyone. I just kind of picked a scene that I don't really read a whole lot, so I'm excited to kind of jump in here. If folks want to follow along in the book, it's on page 65. I drew myself a bath, my tub, the grungy yellow of cigarette-stained fingers, hairs clinging to its sides and perimeter. As I sat down in it, I thought of the Red River that gushed blood and guts and catfish just a few blocks away. I wondered how cold the rapids in Peguis were right now, those fat leeches waiting for a fish to suckle off. Here, my penis wriggling in the bath, I too am cheap tackle. Those frothy waters full of lucky cans and severed hands and oak leaves that clogged our drain pipes. Water was a mentor to me, a playmate. Water was a feral child. I used to sit on the bank of the rapids, feet dangling in the stream. If I stayed still long enough, the crawfish would climb over them, inspect the grooves between my toes. What would life be like if I were a crawfish? A little pest that ages too fast, only 3 months, and then they're plunged into the cruel world of adulthood. To be a crawfish is to be in constant fear of your own self, to be ripped apart by kin who pierce your soft spots with teeth and claws that shred you from the inside out. To be a crawfish, I thought, is the best primer for survival. If you can make it as a crawfish, you can make it as anything. I plucked the crawfish from my toes. I let the water have it, let it fumble, scramble, try to live. The rapids are an apocalyptic landscape. I watched it catch its groove, then tumble into the ducks and disappear. Who knew where it would end up? I hoped it would continue living, even if only one more day, but who really knows those things? The water is a furious road, and the only words we can say to one another are simple: witness me. The water in Winnipeg was just as feral as the rapids in Peguis. The only difference was that this river ate children, not crawfish. My cookum told me that Manitoba was a name taken from the Cree, Manitowoc, which meant something like the Strait of the Spirits. She said it was the sound of the drum, of water beating the rocks in a constant thrum, noise like a round dance where the water would ask you to sing alongside it. The river is a space of convergence where streams and currents intersect briefly, an orgy of kissing streams, a hub of sex and slapping fins. The water is the color of rust, the kind of rust that becomes a sequin when a raindrop hovers over it. When I look out over the red, I see the strait, but I wonder just what in the hell a spirit is doing out there. How many Manitou? Was mine out there too? Why would the water want to straighten my spirit? Ain't that why I have two? The elders used to tell us to humble ourselves to the water. I heard them in the speeches of Immortan Joe, do not become addicted to water. But water was always a shameful thing for me, to piss, sweat, spit, ejaculate, bleed, to cry. How in the hell do we humble ourselves to water when we're so damn humiliated by it? Life ain't always as easy as an old story that never changes, you know? And we weren't always so embarrassed of ourselves as water. We were basins of thought too once. Bathing was a tumultuous experience when I was a kid. My mom would run me a bath, but the water would be the temperature of the lava in Dante's Peak. I would feel like Granny Ruth paddling through acidic volcanic liquid in my mother's bathwater, my legs turning pink and tingling, the heat stinging my nose, all the while my mother reassuring me, it's not even hot. Then she would climb in, her tummy and breasts falling loose in the water, stretch marks like footprints on her belly and hips. She'd nestle me in between her legs and ease us both back into it, the hot water cradling us, covering my chest, opening up my lungs. My exhales a steady stream of dirt and mucus and phlegm that purged themselves from my body. And her hair, her long brown hair snaked around the tub, wrapping itself around my arms, making me look like I too had hair the length of a horse's tail. My mother would wash us both with L'Oreal Kids shampoo, the watermelon kind, a green bottle with a pink lid and an eye peeking out at us from behind the label. It was the shampoo that never burned my eyes. Mama assured me of that. And while we lathered up our hair, I built myself a pair of breasts just like my mother's, using the soap from my head. Mama, you think I'm pretty? I'd ask, and she'd reply, my boy, ain't no one ever looked better. We'd cuddle in the tub until the water turned cold and opaque, until our nipples turned to points and our fingers pruned like cookums. My mom would get out first, and I'd remain in the water, gurgling it in the mouth, taste of soap, dirt, skin, and sweat. I drank it in small sips until my belly felt hard as a rock. I liked to put my head beneath the water, listen to time slowing down, the sound of my body pulsing in my head, and the distorted voices of Roger and Mom arguing downstairs, the enhanced sound of their footsteps, which made their own music, gave their own cues. In the water, I was beautiful. My boy body was genderless in the tub. My penis too shriveled to really look like anything but the nether regions of a Barbie doll. My nipples shielded by a face cloth, covering a shame that would never be mine. The water never set me straight. The water leaked with me down the drain. Here, now, in my own bathtub alone, I think of Mama. I think of those rapids. I think of how they split rocks and dissolved them into sand. I think of how water crafted this whole damn planet, carved it into animals. I think of home. Just why in the hell did I ever decide to leave? Cookum's gone, and Mama's got the sickness of loneliness, the kind that'll turn your liver into coal. Leaving made me feel as if I'd split myself, this throb, a residue of pride having left. For the life of me, all I wanted now was this, to regress, to crawl backwards into time, into a womb that smells of earthworms and eggshells, for my knowledge of the world and its pains to be a second thought, for my idea of home being bound by only 4 walls on the res. All I wanted was to shift back up inside my mother in the bathwater of her uterus, to count time as a crawfish would, for days to mean something other than another notch on the wall, another treaty dollar earned. I wanted that. I wanted all of that. How easy, how warm, how outlandishly impossible, I thought. Just how in the hell are we supposed to live in a world that ages us like fish? I washed my hair with Head and Shoulders, killed the bugs that were making a life on my scalp. I felt myself in the tub, blood stiffened to a point, made my own throbbing drum beats, my own Manitoba pow, my own round dance being the huff of breath you make when the nerves on your cock tingle like pop rocks. I came into my bathwater, let the residues swim, and eventually drown in the tub. If you come back, I said, don't ever come back as an Indian, you hear? Thank you.
I'm so glad you read that one. That's actually like the beginning. That's a quote that I had written down that I was going to ask you about. So that's amazing. I actually listened to the audiobook this time. I've read this book. I'm coming out as a fanboy right away. I think this is the fourth time that I've read this book. And so it was interesting, like observing different things, listening to it this time. And I listened to the audiobook while I like did the laundry and made soup and sort of everyday stuff, which I also made me reflect on how the book really covers kind of like everyday intimacy or everyday intimacy of like Native life, like washing your hair with your mom and things like that too, but also that section really encapsulates like the power of water too. And thinking about like where the water in Winnipeg comes from and the Johnny's in a bath with too, and that relationship to Shoal Lake and that sort of stuff. And like water is its own character within the book that is continually woven throughout too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like it's just hard for me to ever divorce myself from the Red River. Having grown up right there the whole time and fishing in it and being disgusted by like the catfish that were always on the bottom and stepping on them sometimes. But yeah, for me, like even here in Calgary, I learned that they can also put like tobacco down here and then it will travel all the way back home. So it's just, for me, like water in the riverways that we have here are just like so connective and like veins to me that they really much become characters. I just finished my newest book, Making Love with the Land. There's so much water in it again. Which is like strange for someone who's like, I'm not on the coasts. I'm like a prairie boy, but you know, specifically in Manitoba, water is so central to life there. And just the Red River itself as kind of being this, this intersection of trade, the space of post-contact nations like the OG Cree, which I'm a part of, and the Métis. So for me, just like it shows me is that water itself is like the primary caretaker and caregiver and birther. And it also just kind of goes to show me the kind of vivacity and the kind of real sacredness, I guess I would say, of like how sex and sexuality condone and maintain us. And the river for me encapsulates all of that.
Like the complexity of like Johnny coming in the bath and then also saying things like, why would the water want to straighten my spirit, or humbling yourselves to water and things like that too.
For sure, yeah. And for him, at least in the book for Johnny, it's just like a very much the place where he gets to like fully embrace his like femininity and like disregard kind of Western notions of sex and gender and sexuality. And the water for him, and kind of the fluidity of it all, the verb there, is kind of that, it's that space of allowance. So he's continually drawn to river bodies in the book.
I love the depiction also of like being nude with your family and like just like nudity being normalized, because I definitely grew up in a household with a sister and we were like naked as children all the time. Oh my gosh, we never put on clothes. Just like that kind of intimacy of like just being naked around your family that I don't see that much in Indigenous literature. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Like I had this picture at home of me and like my cousins, and we were all like this res, and we had like, you know, those like electric cars. It was like a Bigfoot that kids drive. And we were just like running around buck naked all day, riding around on this car. And like my parents and grandmas, they couldn't keep close enough to like save our lives. And it's very much like that now too, with like the young ones in our family, just like kind of run around buck naked. It was like that's very normal, I'd say, to
Yeah.
us.
Like no shame about your body up until like a certain point. Yeah. And like you can see
Exactly.
in that narrative like where Johnny becomes like aware of like gender being impressed upon him by
Mhm.
yeah, that too.
So if you ever like
Mhm.
meet my sister specifically, like anytime I brought a partner home, she's like, "Look at this picture," and it's like us buck naked on this Bigfoot. I'm like, "You're so embarrassing."
Yeah, there's so many like Christmas photos of us just like not wearing clothes. I don't know how we got into this, all these family photos. Yeah. Well, I let us here. Yeah. And I think like the symbolism, like I grew up in a hair salon, so like the symbolism behind like washing hair with someone is very intimate too. In our hair. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I think like hair washing is like this is earned sometimes under an intimacy that when it comes to hair, at least with me, and like the washing of hair is just like a really kind of intensely intimate space of like an act as well, but like my hair itself as well. I don't let people touch often.
Hmm.
So yeah, like to have someone wash your hair is like this extreme luxury to me. Sometimes I just like also tell hairstylists like don't wash my hair. Like I've already done it, just cut it.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's a strange vulnerable allowance. It's almost like getting tattooed as well. It's just like there's just like this extreme intimacy that you're placed within. And I definitely see that with like hair washing, and just hair in general too.
Yeah. I just got a tattoo today, actually on my arm.
Oh.
It's seeping into some second skin. But yeah, it's true. It's kind of the same level of intimacy. It was really interesting seeing my mom growing up like transform people with their hairdos, but also like the level of trust cutting hair and like different relationship as a Native woman doing that career. I actually learned in Misquachis that like that was one of our traditional careers. There were like hairdressers in our encampments that would like there would be different styles for different seasons and things like that too. So I love that idea. Yeah,
Oh,
very old
amazing.
profession for us.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm also like blind as a bat if I had to take my glasses off, and then I can never see what they're doing when they cut my hair. So it's also like anxiety inducing. I'm like, please don't mess it up.
Yeah, that's super fair. Oh my gosh. Yeah. The other thing that really struck me reading it this time was just like um Johnny being so forgiving of his mom and like the last scene saying to love me mama cookum had to love you too, when she was almost a little bit jealous of that relationship that Johnny had with her mother, and thinking about like just Johnny's like immense love for his mom to forgive her for bringing Roger into the household, and that he's just kind of the love of him earning this money to go support his mom for his funeral too, was something that really struck me, that like complex love.
I mean, I feel like all cookums are like secretly like it's me being as a kid. Like any chance I had, I was like, I want to go to Grand's house, and my mom
Yeah.
would be like, I thought we were gonna hang out this weekend. So I think there's like a little bit of that in Johnny, but yeah, Johnny just as a character is I think the most forgiving person I've ever read about or met, and just this kind of I kind of think about him, I guess if I had to give him like a subtitle, that he's almost like the pain eater. He's someone who just like continually swallows and like consumes other people's pain and then just like excretes it in various different ways. So for me, when I was crafting him as a character, I wanted him to kind of be this continual salve throughout the book. Um, and I guess I would say like I was also a little bit inspired by like John Candy from like the Green Mile, who has like that ability to like eat that pain and like expunge it. It's mostly sickness that he does. But like Johnny, I would say is kind of like an affect eater, and just like has this resounding chasm of a space within him to hold worlds of pain, really. So I think like that for me when I was crafting him, I was like, that was like if he had a superpower or an ability, like that would be it.
Yeah, and becoming friends with Jordan later, even though I like being in love with the bisexual icon, yes, or I will project that onto him. Yeah.
I like the title. I never thought of that.
Yeah, my gosh. I've heard you when you were doing your Canada Reads run, which I want to ask you a little bit more about later too. That like Johnny is still for you like a living character that kind of floats around in your head or that you live with every day. So I'm curious if like how has Johnny evolved since the publication of this book, or do you see him like actively in your head doing different things, having different adventures?
I mean, people have like tried to pressure me into writing a sequel. I just thought that would kind of cheapen it for me.
Yeah.
But like Johnny is a character that's lived with me since I was like a teenager, really. I don't know if I've said this before, but I'll just speak briefly about it again too. Like I was writing this book when I was about like 17, 18, and was like very obsessed with like the beatniks, so like Ginsberg and Kerouac and all of them. That I was writing this book called The Concrete Poets, and it was about basically all these indigenous folks who were like pool hall hustlers in Selkirk, and then would go and like smoke weed until like 5 a.m. and like have existential talks. Obviously that never worked. I had to end up cutting it, but Johnny was like a tertiary character in that book. Just kind of this like high fan glamour queen who was just like also just like a complete badass. So it's like full anti energy in this like little femboy body. So he definitely like stayed with me, and I've always kind of been a character or a person that I like live with. So he was very much like inspirational for Full Metal, but I felt like I was just writing like the virtual kind of cybernetic counterpart to him, almost like his online, I guess, personas. And then I was working with Jordan Abel at the time with Full Metal, and we had these beach poems, and they were just too sensual for this kind of cyborg virtual space that we cut. And I was doing this creative writing class, 100 pages in 100 days. And so I had the beach poems, and then I swear it was like the weirdest, most ominous thing, but like Johnny just like sashayed right into the front of my mind. It was like, give me a chance, it's my time. So those were like some of the first scenes that I wrote of Johnny, of like the beach ones. And he's definitely led me into my next book as well, which is nonfiction about me, but during the time with Johnny, since like 2018 he was published. Everyone always confuses me for Johnny, like in interviews, but even on like dates, and like random romantic encounters, being called Johnny in like the bedroom and stuff. So I have to like unpack this of how people just like interchange us. So that was like the start to my next book, and really kind of thinking about the after effects. So like if Johnny is a pain eater, how does he house and become kin with like mental health? So that's led into Making Love with the Land. So he's still very much around. And I don't think I'll ever write a sequel, but there's also film or TV options coming soon. So it's also fun to kind of imagine him in a visual sense like that.
I know. I wonder how much you can share with us about the process of this film, like where it's at, or if you have any gossip about that.
I mean, it's definitely interesting. So like I've had to kind of write the baseline script, and I am like not a screenwriter, because I'm like, well, I can't really talk. Where's the interior monologue? That's all Johnny really is. So it was like fun to imagine him in that sense. So we're still kind of working through some details, but it does sound like it's going to be a mini series instead of a film, which I think is better, just more space. And everyone's very excited to explore the other characters, and kind of make it giving Jordan more of a space. So it's kind of like a trio throughout the whole thing. And they have like storyboard images for Johnny, or sorry, for Jordan, who's like this kind of indigoth, and I am like, I can't unsee Jordan as this like goth badass now. So it's been really fun. I'm excited to see where it's gonna go. And then just like who we were like picking as reference photos for what these characters would look like. I can't share that yet, but there's a lot in the works. It's going to be fun. And some of your favorite side characters, I think, will have larger roles, like Peggy as well, will also be there more.
Ooh, that's really exciting. I think it makes sense for Jordan to be like a goth babe. I see it. I like the contrast between like Johnny Appleseed being like super glamour and then Jordan being goth and TS in the middle. I don't know exactly what I see TS looking as in my head. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, like, I just kind of saw him as like this complete fuckboy, like every res has. So like that's the vibe that I put up for them. So we'll see what they do with
Yeah.
that. But Indigent
Yeah.
fuckboy.
Yeah. There there are lots of those. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I wanted to ask you like a bit about genre, because you're talking about your new book that comes out 2022, Making Love with the Land. And so like, because we've had some chats about relationship to genre and like what is nonfiction, what's poetry, what's fiction, and how these kind of boundaries don't necessarily exist within our kind of storytelling too. And I mean, obviously, I think I'm of the mind that like any fiction we write is to some extent autobiographical. Like there's always going to be parts of you in it. Especially I feel like as Indigenous people would probably like the worlds that we create that way. But yeah, just a little bit about why you chose nonfiction for the next one, or how you see like relationship to genre.
Yeah, that's a great question. Something I thought about a lot, and we've talked about working together with your work, is that I think one, like we as like Indigenous folks, Two-Spirit Indigenous queer folks as well, but I think Black folks, I would say, are also in that same regime, is that we can't like fully divorce our physical body from the bodies of text that we inhabit. So like they're always like umbilical. Which to me, when people kept reading, it clearly says like a novel on it, but they kept thinking it's nonfiction, it's memoir. So I thought, well, like really, like genre, like gender completely fails us in these kind of encapsulations, I guess. There's a couple scenes in Johnny, like the bear topping scene that everyone loves me reading aloud for some reason. And a couple dream sequences where people are like, this is like magical realism. It doesn't fit with the realism of this novel. And my response to editors and folks who were saying things like that was, I think like Johnny's dream sequences, albeit fantastical, are, I would say, more real than kind of living out his life, because those are also like dreams as kin as well. So for me, I kind of just think of myself now as like a genre outlaw, in that I just kind of deploy all, I guess, kind of the toolkit of writing when I craft something. So like, people keep reading this as poetry, they read Full Metal as like prose poems. So I wanted to move into nonfiction, one to kind of address some of the things like confusing me for Johnny, what does that mean? And also to kind of give back to community, like, as we have like, you know, rampant Indigenous youth suicides across all of Turtle Island. And then just having like secret conversations with family and kin around topics of mental health in secret. So I thought like what I can do is just like, if people want to kind of see me as Johnny, then I'll just like strip on my own terms. So nonfiction felt for me like the best kind of movement to kind of take off the mask of character or persona, and then just really kind of lay it bare and allow myself to be fully vulnerable on my own terms and talking about my own mental health. And hoping that allows, you know, space and conversation for other Indigenous folks across Turtle Island to also have that conversation with themselves, but also with others, and to kind of like destigmatize this idea of mental health as something inherently bad.
And that, yeah, it's definitely okay to seek help. There's, I feel like, a big rhetoric in lots of Native families about not seeing therapists and things like that too. But I think it is like the weird mechanics of CanLit, of which there's lots of drama in this week, that make us like separate out into these three categories for the purposes of like awards and marketing and things like that too. It's something I talked to my friend Connor about with his novel Avenue of Champions. It just came out. I'm like, this, yeah, he was like, I didn't want to write this as nonfiction because then I have to verify all the research in it. I was like, oh my gosh, that's actually so freeing, because I've been trying to write a little bit of fiction and like research this certain era, and then I was like, oh, it doesn't have to be all correct, really, like historically accurate. It can just be yeah.
Well, that's the thing too, on the other side of it, for like non-Indigenous readers reading our work, of like, it's almost becomes like, it's perceived as like confessional at all times, when for me it very much isn't. Like, I'm like, this is a fully fictional character that I've crafted, but they kind of read it as kind of one confession and then confirmation for whatever their own needs, I guess, would say, are in terms of like being better allies or like thinking they know. So I'm also trying to like unlearn the idea that writing is like testimony, when it can be just, you know, spaces for fun and joy and exploration.
Yeah, I think so too. And also, to me, I think like Johnny is such a fully formed character that I don't I don't see him as you. I know he's like a boy from Peguis, and like there's some overlap in like the autobiography, but yeah, he feels like very fleshed out to me. So I can't conflate him with you in my head,
Thank you. Well, I do
yeah.
sometimes when I do writing workshops, folks like ask how I crafted this character, and I said like there's so many times where I was like hitting dead ends, or just didn't have the key to get into like the next bit of the novel. That my like advice to myself and that I give my students is sometimes like sleep with your characters, and they all think that's hilarious. But there was just times when like I couldn't think of what to do next. I would like almost like role play or like really kind of embody Johnny. Like what does he like? What does he look like? What does he think tastes disgusting? Like what does it feel? What does it feel like for him when someone runs their hands over his arm? And like really trying to hone in on like the sensations of his body. And then so many times I would find myself like dreaming of Johnny or like vignettes that he would do. And like that was very, very helpful for me when I was writing this novel, was to like embody him and then like explore with him in dream and sleep.
I love that idea. Yeah, there's like so much, he's such an embodied character too, and like very vividly describes like his relationship to his body and how others perceive his body too, both in Winnipeg and on the res. So yeah, I think that's good advice.
Sleep with characters, do it more.
Sleep with your characters. What if you don't want to? What if it's all your characters, the villains?
True.
Something else that really stuck out for me this time, and I think I texted you this, was like how much you describe food in the book. So it was like descriptions of food, like relationships to food, and like the scarcity of them in living in the city too, and like recipes, or even like very vivid scene of Johnny like making rice pudding and then getting made fun of for having this like brown rice pudding that was not Scandinavian, or just like talking about his body, like his arms being like too weak to stir, like he hadn't learned this kind of like high level of femininity that is like stirring rice pudding for an event, for a community event. So, and like sweet and sour meatballs. I don't know if that's like a prairie thing, but I ate a lot of sweet and sour meatballs growing up too, like that intercultural kind of exchange from that event too. And like his Cookham's Jello cake. There's a lot of food, a lot of food I love.
It's just funny, like when I never really thought about it. It was like food was just like also kind of a character. And it's interesting, like when I think about like what we eat during like, you know, a feast, there's like strange things like Jello cake or rice pudding or like meatballs. And so like Peguis is just like right beside a Hutterite colony. So like my grandmothers and grandfathers, like they tell me like we just kind of exchanged recipes and like shared food, and that was a way of survival as well. So I'm like, okay, so I'm like maybe meatballs are a tradition. I don't know, but they're damn good. So I think like, yeah, growing food for me, and we were talking about Earl's earlier, and how I think any restaurant that like gives you free bread is like the epitome of decadence. Because for food, like me and my family grew up really poor, and like food stamps was the thing that we used. So like the idea of food was something that was like almost unattainable, as like given the kind of class structure that we were and are in. So like food is like such a luxury, it's such a gifting, and it's also just so tied to the women. So like even like watching my like 70-year-old grandmother stir like pie filling for like an hour, I'm like, my arms are sore. So there's like a hulking strength, I think, in the preparation of food that women have and house, and are just like amazing at. So I love partaking in that as well. And then I think like another thing too, like with food in me, is like also trying to normalize, at least for myself, the idea of like loving food. Because I also like, I have like really intense struggles with like anorexia and eating disorders. So like I also had this very difficult relationship with food throughout my whole life. So I think I was just like mentally trying to explore how can I like love food for something more than just sustenance? And then yeah, just having these like rich recipes of like eating stovetop chicken or making this Jello cake or like going fully carry at Culturama at school.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I love that part too. Oh my gosh. Or like Jordan and Johnny going to that restaurant and they're like, what is this? Why are they feeding us food that's like not cooked or things like that? And then just wishing that they could just go to Nietzsche Commons, which rest in peace, Nietzsche Commons is no more.
I know.
Yeah. There's a bit of commentary about Johnny's body too, of someone saying, I thought you were skinnier when he meets up with them in real life or things like that too. And his kind of like pushback of like, I have this body and it's fine, from that too.
Yeah, and like I think that was like an exploration that I wanted to, and like a conversation that I wanted to have in the book, that I think that like Billy Ray Belcourt does amazingly in his most recent book, is like thinking about like queer desire and consumption and like things like Grindr and hookup apps, is like how like our bodies just become like monetized in a sense, or as currency for desire, which we will almost always fail at as BIPOC folks who are queer, in the throes of white queer desire. So yeah, like wanting Johnny to be like staunch and powerful enough to be like, I have a body and it's a body worth loving and I don't give a shit what you think about, in terms of like trying to chastise his body. So just like having that reverence for himself was something that I was like really adamant about making him keep and have and showing others too.
And just like frank discussion about his like uncle's bodies and his mom's body and that sort of thing too.
Yeah, definitely. And like, yeah, just the kind of amalgamation of bodies too, like the nudity of children, but then also just like the proximity of everyone else as well, as like feeling and having and touching each other's bodies consensually as well, but like hugging and just like letting yourself be completely enwrapped within a body, and normalizing fat bodies and thin bodies, and just like trying to maintain that grace, I would say, of each other for each other.
Billy and I talk about that a lot too, or like we feel huge in like mainstream society, but then like when you go to the res, we're like, we're small. We're not, like, I don't know, Cree people are just like, we're large. I think I read something, they were like the largest, like tallest people on earth before contact. And there's all these
really?
stories of like taller than the Germans too. So any of us that got shorter was because of nutritional problems, obviously, when we lost our main food source on the prairies. Yeah, it's just like it's okay not to be not to be small.
Yeah, exactly. Every time I go home too, like my uncles are like literal giants, so like 7 foot tall or something almost. I'm like literally always staring up. And then I was just like blessed with these like large Cree shoulders. And I'm like, I feel like a linebacker sometimes. I'm like, why am I so broad? But like, I love it.
Yeah, it's good. There's a comment in the chat, and it's kind of a question I had too, because I listened to the audiobook and you're very good at narrating it. And I really like when an author does their own audiobook too. If you considered anyone else to narrate the audiobook, or was it only ever going to be you as narrator?
Oh, good question.
Yeah.
So like when the audiobook was coming out, so that was like 2019, I was like really adamant about not doing the audiobook. Because I had signed up to do it, I think like 6 months prior. And like right during this time, I had just broken up with like my long-term partner at the time, who like very much informs a lot of the a lot of Tias. And there were like small scenes between Johnny and Tias, which were like exact replications of me and my previous partner. Who's now one of my best friends. But he was like signed on to be the audiobook director because he was basically there since like page 1 of this. So like doing the audiobook like weeks after this intense breakup, not intense, but it's like this hard, difficult severance, was something that I did not want to do. Like having to like read these aloud with him and to him, remembering these scenes and remembering us and our history together. But ultimately, we all kind of agreed that we had a couple people who auditioned for, reading Johnny Appleseed. And I was like, they just don't sound Manitoban enough to me. Like they just don't, you don't sound like Pegless. And I was like, no one can, if we're gonna do Johnny, I'll do the justice to Johnny and do it myself. So the audiobook experience was one, probably the most difficult thing I've ever done. But two, in like pure Johnny fashion, like reading this audiobook together with my previous partner and then like going back to our respective places and talking to the night, he allowed us, I would say, he was kind of like, yeah, the allowance for us to like grieve and I would say like air our pains and then like start salving our wounds and mending those. So he was very much a gift who like like my partner was there at the time when doing this, but when doing the audiobook, Johnny almost like brought us back together and put us into a space that we could craft, this beautiful friendship that we have now. But it was very difficult. I think I was like, we must have went to like Costco sizes of Kleenex boxes. Like I was in this booth, just like bawling and taking a break every 15 minutes. And this audio directors were like, what is happening? So yeah, I really enjoyed doing it. It was a great experience for me and for us as people to grow together using Johnny again, and letting him guide us, I would say. But I don't know if I could ever do an audiobook again. Like I definitely won't be doing the audiobook for my like nonfiction. It's just like way too personal. So it's like kind of an emotional toll. Maybe it's just like my writing that I think narrating and orating costs me. So it's definitely better now, but yeah, it was quite the intensity. And it was in July and I was like this small booth with no AC. So I was like sweating bullets.
Oh my gosh.
So it was like physically exhausting at the same time.
Oh my gosh. That's so interesting to read like into like the affect of the breakup is in the reading of the audiobook.
Which is why I can't listen. I have never listened to my audiobook. I'm like, I just can't be transported back to that moment. But I feel like that era, like, yeah, the aura of grief was like very much infused into the audiobook. So I'm also like scared to revisit that, but maybe one day.
Maybe one day. I know that makes so much sense in like the heartbreak that is like TS kind of moving on in his life with Jordan. Yeah. Because you do read it very emotionally that and which makes sense. Yeah, it is like very heartbreaking. And also just heartbreaking that TS can't come to terms with being a bisexual legend and to me. And
I know. He's so stubborn. Typical creep.
Yeah, saying like I'm not gay and Johnny being like me neither. Yeah.
Meanwhile, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. How long does it take to record an audiobook? Like how long are you in this booth?
We were there 8 hours a day for almost 7 days. So it was like full work days.
Whoa.
So like to record, and also I needed so many breaks because I was like, I need to go outside and cry, or like I can't keep myself composed. I need a cigarette break. But yeah, altogether there must have been like 40 to 50 hours it took to like fully record everything. And then having to like reread scenes over and over and over because there wasn't the right, tone. So yeah, it was a long process for like what an 8-hour audiobook. But yeah, so it definitely took some time. But I put in so many breaks. But yeah, it was a long week, I would say.
Yeah, that is. Oh my gosh. I don't know if I could ever listen to myself reading an audiobook, so I don't fault you for not being able to. Yeah.
It's weird, eh? Like listening to yourself. Like I never listen to any podcasts with me in it. I'm like, that does not sound like me. So it's always off-putting slightly.
Yeah, it's so weird because I feel like I sound exactly like my sister. I don't know, is that what we sound like all the time? We're the same person? I guess it's true because growing up when people would still like call the house, they'd be like, which one is this? Yeah, so I guess what we sounded like. Yeah.
I love that.
Which one? Michelle's asking a bit about your new book, which you talked a little bit about. So if you had anything else to share, it's coming out 2022, so you probably sent off your edits, probably, yeah, or getting ARC soon, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I just finished just finished kind of the edits and the acknowledgements and dedication last week. So everything's fully done. It's in the hands now. So spring 2022, it's coming out. So basically the book is just a nonfiction exploration of like three main components: indigeneity, queerness, and mental health. And a lot of it's kind of delving into my own psyche and my own history and relationships I've had with people that were both joyful and beautiful and also extremely harmful. So it took me a long time to write, like, I mean, I don't know if this is long, but like 2.5, 3 years, because it's the amount of like emotional excavation it required was like so exhausting to me as a person. But yeah, so it spans across Alberta, so it's very land-based. So, you know, the scenes and writing on Stone Provincial Park, Head Smashed In, the Bow River takes another large prominent character scene in the book, as well as some of it's in BC, but most of it's in Alberta, and then Manitoba, exploring like, again, Peguis, the Red River, the Narcisse snake dens, and a bunch of little food shacks. But yeah, so it goes over topics like anxiety and panic attacks, suicidal ideation, eating disorders is like my kind of prime component in addition to it, and anxiety. So like basically, yeah, like conversations I've had and stories I've had with people where I just thought about like, okay, I'll just orate, put it into words, my experiences with these, and then tie them in with like land-based knowledge that I have been gifted with, or stories that have been shared with me and that I had permission to use, to kind of rethink about our relationship to mental health, less as like a toxin, and wanting to think about like, how does insomnia serve us as kin? What gifts does it have? So like learning to like reconceptualize ideas of mental health and think about them as kin less so than as enemies. So it was a fun project to do. It just took a while. I'm like kind of done with nonfiction now for a while. So I'm like excited to go turn back to the fiction and to novel. And I'm just freshly starting my next novel too. So it's gonna be fun. Yeah.
That's very exciting. I don't think 2.5 years is long because you're doing so many other things, like doing a PhD, becoming
True,
a doctor.
I was like 2 birds, 1 stone. So I just used like an excerpt from the manuscript for my dissertation, because I was like, I am not going to publish 4 books in the time of doing this PhD. Like, you should just give it to me by now.
Yeah, that's like some Judith Butler stuff. Yeah, 1 year. Yeah. Like Billy was publishing like 1 a year for a while, and it's like, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's tiring. Yeah.
That's the other thing I wanted to ask you about, is Canada Reads and like the kind of affect of when you won. And I wonder if you were there or if you're watching. It's not like Drag Race where they film multiple endings. It's like all live. So curious about a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, that was one intense week.
Yeah.
Because I was also doing events. And my place I was living in at that time before I moved into this place had flooded completely. And so I was living I had a new puppy. So we were like living displaced in various different Airbnbs for like almost 2 months. And then in the middle of all that was this thing, Canada Reads. So yeah, I was watching live every day, like every morning. I fully expected to go home like first or second. I did not think there was going to be this little glitter princess who's like talking about all types of sex acts would be winning Canada Reads. So the first day I think was like the most intense. And so I'll always be kind of on the phone with Debbie Jacobs, who defended the book before and after. But she had this like she was just like a master of game shows, because her and her partner DW had this like full mapped out strategy of what they were going to do. So yeah, I would watch every morning. I remember waking up on the Tuesday to like everyone thinking I was going to give Debbie Jacobs $100,000. It's like, no, it's a RuPaul joke. So on Twitter, everyone's like, what? Is this allowed? So the Tuesday, which was the day I guess I was in like the bottom 2, I did an event, so I couldn't watch live. I'm like, thank goodness. Because it's like, she's like, this is giving me major anxiety just watching like them vote. And then moving forward every day. So yeah, be getting up super early to like, have conversations with Debris and then watch the show and like unpack what I just witnessed. It was very sublime and surreal to be like watching someone else know my book so intimately, sometimes even better than me. But I think that was really beautiful too. And then at the end, like the last episode was like, I did not fully expect to be like sobbing on national television. But yeah, it was a great experience. And I was thinking like the biggest gift that I took away from it, one was like, becoming friends with Deborah. But then in her, like, I would say kind of now viral video of her talking about how Johnny Appleseed was an allowance for her to kind of braid her mohawkness, her queerness together.
Yeah.
And just kind of seeing, like, for me, that was like the entire proof I ever needed of like the strength of story, and what it gives and how it allows and how it mends and builds community. And like that was like the most, I would say, heartfelt thing I've ever seen. And so I just kind of kept remembering that and reminding her of like what we're doing, like what she's doing on that stage with Canada Reads, and Indigenous youth who are watching it all across Turtle Island, and what that means for them to see that. And I remember going back to my res afterwards, and like all these like young kids who are just like coming up with like the coolest hashtags, like Indigigoth, Indigiqueer, Indigifem, and them all kind of just like coming around the car like a bunch of res dogs when I was getting out and just being like, we just need to thank you so much, you and Devery, for what this means for us. It's like, we're questioning our gender, we're like non-binary and trans. And so like that again was like another beautiful gift that I got to see and witness and partake in, of making space for Indigenous youth who identify as queer or two-spirit or trans, and the space that it made for them and the representation that it gave. So yeah, the last day, and then they put me, I was like on this green screen behind after they announced that Johnny had won. None of us had any idea who was going to win. And then they put me like on live television, like not even 30 seconds after they announced this. And I was already emotional, like watching Deborah cry, her grandma's call, like Roger's kids phoning him. And I was like, okay, I like think I got like 3 words out, and then I just like burst into sobs.
Yeah, it seemed like the transition was very fast. So it was just like, and now Joshua. Yeah.
I know. And it was just also like, what made it surreal. It's like this huge moment's happening, and then I just like close your laptop screen and turn around to be like an empty house. So like, yeah, just like kind of having to be like on my own, like in COVID, having all these huge things happen.
Yeah.
So that was
Well,
a bit
your
of a
apartment
wake-up
flooded.
call. Yes,
Yeah.
my apartment flooded. Oh, it was
Yeah.
chaos.
I love hearing the backstory of that. Yeah, I love all the kids, the image of all the kids storming your vehicle on the res. So thank you too. Yeah, like
It
the
was
kids are
so
all right.
cute. Yeah.
Yeah. There's just also like, I feel like kids that are now like millennials are old now, and they're just like, they're like, oh, everyone's queer. Yeah, we all are. Yeah, like people
I
that are like
know.
15 now. Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm so happy for you, but I'm like, there's a radical difference from when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But they never let me forget how old I am as a millennial too. When I got TikTok, I was like shamed by all my younger nephews and nieces and cousins, being like, "You're too old to be on TikTok, Joshua."
I'm too old to. I watch them, but I can't make them. I'm probably too old to be on TikTok too.
I can't make them either. I've tried. I'm like, this is just embarrassing.
Sometimes I have good ideas. I feel like my brain is so informed by TikTok now. I see something and I think like it's a TikTok song, but I can't make them. So
Oh, I know. I have to get rid of TikTok here like every once in a while, because sometimes if I'm just like bored, I'll be like, oh, I'll just watch a couple of videos. I'm like, it's 4 a.m. Like,
Yeah.
And I've fallen down like alt goth TikTok. So yeah, it's fun, but in moderation.
Yeah, and then it gives you like weird revelations where you're like, oh, I didn't know this about myself. TikTok like really figures out your algorithm, and it's like, you have trauma about this, Are you thinking about your gender? Are you perhaps heartbroken? And you're like, oh my God. How do you know?
It's like TikTok and CoStar just like reading me for filth every time I log into them.
Honestly, yeah. Matt has a really good comment, Matt, where getting to see such a radical and true representation of Indigenous queerness was something I couldn't have imagined as a kid/teen growing up. And excited my younger queer family will have Johnny, younger siblings. Yeah.
Yeah, it is just like hopeful to see just kind of the allowance that queerness has, I would say, and not all, but like that Indigenous kids are just embracing it and like taking it so much further. And it's just like, for me, it's really hopeful to see when I go home, like, you know, folks just not like adhering to like gender dress clothes or it's like dress code, sorry. Like, that's so badass. I love that for you. I'm so happy that, you know, the young ones have that, and the kids are all right, as you said.
Or like more conversations, like there's that scene where Johnny's Coca makes him a skirt to go to a sweat, and like he's not allowed because it's not modest, which is, yeah, women are so much more modest in sweats generally than men who are wearing just like shorts and shirtless, which I'm always jealous of.
I know, right? Just like in their kitchen ceremony, I'm like,
yeah, I'm just like, wow, I'm wearing a full like cotton entire tube, but here we are. But like more, yeah, here we are with all my sweaty ribbons.
Oh my God, that's a good poem title. Like that one.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. I was like, that's not bad, actually, sweaty ribbons. It's like a good amount of gross.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, that he has to change to go into that. This is such a memorable scene too. And just like, I feel like there's so many Indigenous youth, or like the Two Spirit Society here in Edmonton, that are like really working with elders and ceremony people to be like, actually, why is this? And is this like actually in alignment with our own beliefs? And if like, and why, where does this come from? Things like that too. Or so I think that's really inspiring too. People are really doing that work.
Yeah, they're like badass now. Like, I remember even a couple of years ago being so intimidated, but like getting into an argument with an elder who like said, we don't have words in Cree for like trans or queer. We can't make that. And that the fact that I'm like trying to make words for them using Cree and like English together is just like such a kind of dishonesty, I would say, to like my ancestors. And I was like, really? We don't have words for queer or trans, but we have words for Apple TV, or like, I don't get it. This weird gatekeeping of language, yeah. And so I just see the kids now being like, well, I don't want to wear a skirt into ceremony, and this is how I'm going to dress. I'm like, that. I'm just like slow clap, chef kiss.
Yeah, so amazing. This is another question about, well, related to kids. If you'd ever write a YA book. So because some teens love Johnny Appleseed, but some scenes are definitely on the saucy side for the younger teen crowd. Although, I mean, if you could just be like Johnny, like the opening scene where he's like watching TV on mute, I feel like this book could be that for some youth too who are a bit young.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I originally wrote Johnny Appleseed as YA. And when I pitched it to Arsenal, it was just after Raziel Reed winning a Governor General for When Everything Feels Like the Movies. And I thought, this is perfect. Like, Johnny is very much in that league, writing for kids or like youth, I would say. So I pitched it, and they were like, ooh, like the K's went after Raziel Reed and Arsenal about like, how did this book win for children's literature? So I just don't think they're ready to like take on another saucy YA novel. So like, we'll keep it a novel, but just like the aesthetics of it, like of the text itself, like the typesets, the fonts, and the shortness of each chapter, I wanted to kind of maintain like an aura of YA fiction, I guess, in the aesthetics of what Johnny looked like. But I think like it was important for me, like having conversations around like, is this too much for youth? Of having to kind of, excuse me, think about innocence and children as something that's delimiting and debilitating, specifically thinking about like sex and queerness, and these are conversations and things that are not taught. I've got like a frog in my throat. And as like children and youth are like very much aware, specifically like Gen Z and onwards are very much aware of sex and sexuality. So like I would say like our desire to like protect them for the sake of innocence can sometimes be harming. So I wanted to kind of have a novel like this that didn't shy away from, you know, one's own body and one's own experiences with one's body and pleasure and desire, and sex acts too.
I agree, especially like we grew up, well, we didn't have a computer for like till I was in grade 6 or something, but now Gen Z is just like obviously has access to any kind of porn or information about sex that they want. So I think it's like to read this book with representations of indigenous queerness is like more like obviously like go for it. I don't know. I don't think I would put any limits on my kids and what they're gonna watch. But we didn't have that growing up. We just watched whatever really. Although I definitely watched like oh my gosh, Showcase or whatever shamefully at night, similar to Johnny at the beginning. Yeah.
For real, like the kids don't know. Like I remember having to like wait until my parents fell asleep to use our one family computer that was right by the room to like look up like boys kissing, or stay up late to watch like Kink on Showcase or the sex show with Sue.
Oh yeah.
I was like very obsessed with that, being like 12, 13, 14. But yeah, we had to be more covert, I think, back in our millennial days to like seek out information like that. And like I, as a kid too, like no one was teaching me about safe sex practices for queerness, or like thinking about like sex outside of the realms of procreation. So I found it on my own, and I think a lot of youth, if not all, do that in some way, shape, or form.
I think so too. Yeah. So would you ever? Do you think your new novel could take the form of YA, or do you think it'll be?
I mean, maybe. It's like a brief little outline of what it's going to be about. So it's going to be like this biopunk novel that relying on like black holes, like travel back to star people, like our original ancestors. And so like, yeah, each of these kids, these two spirit kids are like reawoken as star people, I guess, in some sense, and each like have an ability. So like one character who's not going to be a main one, but has like when she kisses water bodies, she like removes toxins from them. So like this kind of healing abilities. But I guess you could say it kind of would teeter on YA again, because it's all just going to be featuring like indigenous youth as my main characters, but a lot more goth this time around, a little more horror. I would say.
Interesting. That's super cool. Yeah, I think that's probably a good place to leave it off, thinking about this new novel.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned and go buy Johnny Appleseed at Glass Bookshop or take it out from the library. And also look for this new Making Love to the Land book in 2022. Is it available for pre-order yet?
I don't believe so. No, not yet. But soonish.
So we can't push it on people yet. Okay.
We'll get on it. We'll keep a good eye on it. Oh, this is a really, really fun Monday evening. Thank you. And I also, like, when I finished reading Johnny Appleseed, I just sat with it on my chest for a little bit and just sat there, just was still, because it was just lovely. And Johnny was such an amazing character and so full of, like, you know, someone said in the comments, so full of joy or seeking joy. So this was great. Thank you. I could have listened to you guys chit chat for another hour, but my kids will miss me if I don't go home at some point. But so thank you very much. For people who are watching, our next Canada Reads, it is a Canada Reads author. Our next Starfest event is on Wednesday, when we're hosting Natalie Zena Walshots, who wrote Hench, and Johnny Appleseed beat Hench by 1 vote in our own library Canada Reads. So you know, we've got everybody's in good company here. So yeah, thank you both. I'm going to just do a few, you know, thank yous to our funders. Our main funder is the City of St. Albert, Friends of the St. Albert Public Library, Alberta Foundation for the Arts, Canada Council for the Arts, and our media sponsors are St. Albert Gazette, T8N Magazine, and this year we have Edify Magazine, which has been great. And I'm going to let all the viewers know at the end of the festival, everybody's going to be getting a survey. We want your thoughts about the events and also ideas for next year, because that makes our jobs easier. And you will be entered to win a set of all the Starfest books, which will include Johnny Appleseed. So thank you. This was lovely. I'm going to say good night. And I hope that when when things get better, and maybe when your new book comes out, that we can actually bring you up to the library, because it would be great to see you in person. So
I'll look forward to it. Thank
yes,
you.
very much.
Yeah, come up to Cree territory.
Yeah.
I'm stuck with the Blackfoots. I need to get out for a bit.
Okay. Good night, Emily. Good night, Josh. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.